So, hello everybody. I'm Lucas Perron, founder and director of the international research platform SIMM. So good to see that so many of you are again out there online with us for the first session on the symposium, the 5th symposium, following our opening session last week with Jeffrey Baker's keynote. You can see it online. We decided to organize our symposium entirely online. I want to thank again the BOZAR team to make this possible. In fact, today I'm nevertheless not welcoming you sitting somewhere in BOZAR, but at the nearby office of SIMM. The reason for this is that the building of BOZAR had to be evacuated because of a fire which broke out last night on the rooftop. We all really hope the damage is limited. During today's first of 8 symposium sessions, we focus on research which tries to understand what motivates musicians to want to engage themselves in social and community music programs. Anne de Bishop will chair today's session. After the short 10-minute presentations of the 3 scholars, Anne de Bishop will first have a panel discussion with them so that they exchange some of their ideas amongst themselves. During the Q&A following the panel discussion, I will be able to propose some of your questions to them. The Q&A will not be very long though, about 20 minutes, so I will surely not be able to introduce all your questions. Forgive me for this in advance, please. As you can read in the chat, your camera and audio will, they have been muted and will continue to be muted throughout the session. If you have questions for the Q&A, please use the Q&A button down below your screen, not the chat button. You can use a chat button for other things, but for your questions, please use the Q&A button. Your questions will only be visible for the speakers and moderators, not for the other attendees. I will be back later on to tell you about the rest of the symposium program the coming weeks. And before giving her the floor, let me first tell you what Anne de Bishop is involved in. Besides being co-founder of SIMM, of the platform, she was director of Demos Flanders, the network of social artistic projects in this country. Anne is now researcher and gives art pedagogy, social artistic and art teacher training at the Ghent Music Conservatory, which is part of the University College of Ghent in Belgium. Anne, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Hello, everybody. Nice to see that so many people are here. Well, this session of the symposium, we will focus on the position and the perspective of musicians being active in social music projects, their experience and their visions, their motivations as well to do this kind of work as a musician, and of course as well the actual way they make music with a certain group of people. For example, what type of music is being played and why was this chosen? What kind of musical and pedagogical strategies do they use? How do musicians deal with social aims of projects? And maybe more in general, what are musicians' main experiences in this type of work? And what are their needs in order to make their musical work with these groups qualitative and fulfilling? A lot of questions, and the focus on the perspective of the musician is still rather broad, I think. But nevertheless, this perspective is really essential in order to understand this field of practice. And by consequence as well, in order to undertake whatever action to improve the field. We welcome 3 researchers who will present their work in this session. And these are Philippe Verneert from Lucas School of Arts, Belgium, Kate Wareham from University of Sheffield, and John Sloboda from Guildhall School of Arts, London. The first presentation will be given by Philippe Verneert. Philippe is a jazz musician himself. He's very active in all kinds of professional networks in Belgium as well as internationally. And he's now finalizing his PhD research at Lucas School of Arts in Belgium. So Philippe, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much for inviting me to this beautiful conference. I have 10 minutes, so I will quickly go through the things I want to say. I share my screen for you. So I hope you can see this. Well, as a researcher in improvisation, I'm interested in community music projects involving improvisation to see which artistic and pedagogical strategies are developed here. We wanted to zoom in on these strategies to see if they could possibly enrich formal music education. So I have some starting points that were well, first an overview, what I'm going to say to you, some starting points. Then I'm going to focus a bit on the background of the project I'm researching, that is the Austin Street Orchestra, we call it TOZO. Then a short word about the pedagogical artistic strategies and some preliminary results of a pilot study we performed. So TOZO, the Austin Street Orchestra, is an adult-based musical project in Austin, Belgium. It was founded in 2014 as an artistic and positive alternative for the negative public opinion concerning the growing group of homeless people in the city of Austin. Austin, which is a medium-sized coastal city in the Flemish region of Belgium. Austin was facing an increase in this number of homeless people, many of them who come to Austin, of course, in search of a better life, sometimes hoping to reach the UK. So the starting point of TOZO was not to keep people busy or keep them off the streets. The main idea was jointly create a positive story using collective instrumental and vocal improvisation, in which the crossover was made between different musical genres, let's say between the stage and the street. In this study, we focus on the approach of the coaches. It started as a community music project for homeless adults, but it was open for everybody, coached by 3 musicians. These musicians were chosen due to their experience and affiliation with community music projects and their ability to take up different roles that can be typical for community music, like educator, facilitator, composer, social worker, and so on. Indeed, rather than leading the ensemble in a top-down manner, they take an egalitarian position in the project, being at the same time participant and facilitator, and by adopting a non-apologetic attitude and displaying a benign interest in all group members. The 3 coaches, they work simultaneously with the orchestra. It results in a negotiation of ideas between the coach and the participants, between the coaches among themselves, and also between the participants. All this is happening while playing, while improvising, experimenting. Although acknowledging the importance of the structural organization, the project started from a non-committal idea where the participants were not expected to have any previously musical skills or experience, and they could freely come in and go in the rehearsals. Basically, the doors were always open. Everybody could come in, and the music started immediately. There was some coffee and biscuits, which is very important. Also some installations, some musical instruments. Now TOZO has grown into a music lab with 20 musicians from very different social and musical backgrounds. In fact, for the moment, and I'm very sad to say, the project stopped because of the corona crisis, and even some participants we don't know. We try to keep in touch with them, but some of them are disappeared. Some financial support was provided by the local government, which the latter is getting more and more difficult due to the recent developments in Belgium. Okay, so let's have a look at the pedagogical artistic strategies that were used by the coaches. Of course, in a project like this, the coaches, they play an important role. As in other projects, there has been some research about it even recently. It's important to say that the strategies the coaches developed or used were not, were generated, in fact, during the process of working with the group. So not in advance. It was not like they had a system and they said, okay, we're going to use these strategies to work with this orchestra. It was not like that. So I did like a grounded theory research using partly artistic research, because I was involved in the project for 3 years, playing with them, also doing concerts with them. I used texts from the coaches and in-depth interviews, and some I did a video simulated recall with all of them, which was a very good method. To do the coding, we used the Atlas TI software. So then we came up with 5 themes, and one which is not an artistic or pedagogical strategy, but it was a very important one. The beliefs the teachers or the coaches had was very important in the data we used. So we came up with these, let's say, 5 themes. So rethinking musical parameters, it was very important for the coaches to let go their preconceived musical knowledge. They asked themselves, what is music? How can we rethink musical parameters such as structure, melody, tempo, and harmony? And we have to accept the noise, and we have to accept the chaos. There was a lot of embodied interaction. The music was never stopped. The rehearsals were like a non-stop. There was always playing, 2-3 hours at a time. And they used a lot of non-verbal signs, but during playing, not stopping and then conducting or directing, walking around, dancing, a lot of facial expressions. All this led to a certain musical entrainment, also an involvement and a positive atmosphere. The co-coaching was an important point for the coaches. They didn't always agree. They had a lot of discussions among themselves during the rehearsals. But they all said that by doing that, the group also saw that they were also seeking and learning. So it gave also a place to a more egalitarian position. Collaboration was seen in many things. They started the music and the ideas from the group. The input came from the group, from their stories, from their world. It was very important to connect and to blend in with the group. These groups, and perhaps all groups, are masters in detecting fake people. If you fake it, they got you, let's say. And they played with him the whole time. We played together the whole time. There was also some personal knowledge. Each coach had like these little tricks, tips and tricks that they used, and for instance, using graphic sheet music, writing it on the spot, small things from their experience, which aided to get the music going. Surrounding that, and very important, I believe, was the beliefs of the teachers. They all said it changed them. There's a quote, one of the most beautiful projects for me, one of the hardest, but the most sincere. It changed their way of how they look at people, but also how they look at music and society. They took, in a way, they took on themselves an ethic of care, like I heard Marissa Silverman say not so long ago. There was a lot of commitment and an idea of the well-being, that the well-being of the people should be at the first place. I'm going very quickly, but I only have 10 minutes, so I hope you excuse me. I just want to say a few more words about a pilot study we performed using these strategies in a formal music education with a group of also adults with not much previous experience in improvising. We did a 2-day workshop with free improvisation, collaboration, and all the things we thought we learned from the TOZO project. After the workshop, which was 2 days, one of the things we did, we took a short flow scale, and the interesting outcome, of course it's a pilot study, was that this scale scores at 3 dimensions, like you see, that there was a lot of concentration going on, but that not all the participants shared the same sense of control. Not all the abilities of the people matched the challenge of the task. But even then, it was a great potential experience for all of them. They all wanted to do it again. They really enjoyed it. So we thought it was like a strong, using these strategies could lead to a very strong sense of flow, but also a strong sense of motivation to continue playing music. To finish, some final comments. These strategies allow for personal music expression regardless of the level of technical and musical skills. Developing these strategies by working with the orchestra had an impact on the personal and the musical beliefs of the coaches. And we think that these strategies are a good way to develop social dynamics, interaction, musical interaction, and musical entrainment. Improvisation, seen as a collaborative process of making sense of the interaction, can be thus an important tool for formal music education. That is, if we agree that music education is not for the excellence of the few, but for all of us to do music as well as possible, as Ruth Wright stated in one of her articles. A small quote of one of my favorite guitar players to finish, Jim Hall, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, I wonder whether everybody had the time to read the quote. I don't know, but I think your presentation maybe can be shared with everyone. I don't know how we do this technically. But thank you for the rich presentation. I think we come back to you in the panel discussion. So now the second presentation will be given by Kate Wareham. Kate is working at the University of Sheffield, and she's doing research in the field of music psychology. Kate, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much. That's my screen. Got the presentation. I'm hoping that's all okay. Great. I'll get going. So, just a quick bit about me. I completed my MA in music psychology from the University of Sheffield, and I'm now a PhD researcher in the same institution. I'm also trustee of Choir with No Name, a choir that works with homeless and marginalised individuals in the UK, and it's really interesting to hear the previous presentation because there's lots of synergy between the projects carried out by those two organisations. Currently, in these strange times, I'm interim executive director at Yorkshire Dance, so I'm learning all about how that organisation uses dance in very similar ways to what we've been talking about in terms of music. And I previously worked for a number of charity organisations, particularly DePaul UK, with whom this research has been carried out. So that's my background and where I come to this from. So I come to this research considering the participants who participate in music making activities in these sorts of contexts for social impacts. They arrive at the door with a history of music listening that not only informs their participation in the event, but also influences the size and shape of the impact that they receive from that activity. And I think that's the same for the musicians leading the projects as well. Everyone comes to the door with their own personal everyday experiences of music. And that's the context that this research is in. And my contribution to this discussion, I think, is really around the importance of considering this background context in the development and delivery of projects for social impact through music making. This particular research is with DePaul UK, with homeless young people, so young people who are 16 to 25. And DePaul is an organisation that has supported accommodation and emergency accommodation for a number of young people. but they deliver very little formal music-based activity. And there's all sorts of reasons and barriers for that. Quite a lot to do with it being expensive, complex to organise, and where they do have it, it's either really informal or it's a small scale nice to have. And I think there's quite a lot of what I'm looking at. I'd like to sort of see that develop. And so this is pre-research to help inform future music making projects with that organisation. So the context that this is within, I drew from a wide range of literature, but I'll just pull out a few for this. Particularly interested in the mobile nature of music. Homeless young people are incredibly mobile. They engage with the city in a way that most people don't, in a really visceral way. And so that literature about music being mobile, about having an influence and interaction with the space they inhabit, it's been really important in this. As has the literature around functions of music, cognitive, emotional and social activities, and particularly the way in which young people or people in general are able to harness music and have agency in that, in managing their day-to-day life. So the work of Tia Denora has also been very influential in here. And particularly for young people who are facing real struggles on a day-to-day basis emotionally, the use of music for self-regulation of emotions has been really key. And I've drawn upon the work of Sarah Callio and others in that. So as I say, I was interested in music listening as a tool, as a medium of agency in the young person managing their own circumstances, where quite often they don't have huge amounts of control over money aspects of it, but they do potentially have control over the music that they listen to. So very quickly, I've touched on this already, but DePaul UK works with homeless young people. They provide supported accommodation for 6 months or so, where a young person is taken to a level of independence. And they also provide emergency accommodation, which is 1 night at a time with a volunteer host. The context in the UK is that rough sleeping has significantly increased over the last 10 years, and young people are particularly vulnerable to things like sofa surfing, sleeping on friends' sofas, being taken in by people with not the best intentions. And there's a definite issue with hidden homelessness and young people who don't appear to be homeless but are basically homeless because they're moving from place to place from night to night. Amongst those young people, there are major issues with mental health, much more than in the general population. And we might assume that young people who are homeless might not have a smartphone, but many of them do. I bring that up because it's the main way that young people access their music. And whilst the research that I've done and other research with young people in a similar situation has shown the precarity of access to those smartphones and headphones, that piece of kit is particularly important, and possibly more important than the roof over their heads. So the research was carried out in these contexts. The young people were identified by support staff in these projects, and I worked with 31 young people in supported accommodation, and did some really in-depth interviews with 4 of them. In our emergency accommodation, we had 13 people take part. That was much more difficult because of the transient nature of that programme, and 3 were interviewed amongst this group. And as staff and volunteers were much easier to get hold of, we have a disproportionate number of staff and volunteers contributing, but it's really the voices of the young people in the supported and emergency accommodation that I wanted to bring out in this. So the staff and volunteer comments are context. So through these interviews and surveys, I did some coding of those results to pull out any key themes. And there were also some quantitative stats in there that I've put into this. Those themes I've pulled out here, and a discussion in the next few slides. So key things that came out of it. young people listen to a really wide range of genres. I had one staff member say, oh, they'll never listen to classical music. And as a classical musician, I was going, I bet they do. And they did, because nowadays, through YouTube and a number of other streaming services, young people's access or choice about genres is much broader. And that definitely played out within this research. As I said, most listened on their own device, but many of the ones I interviewed would turn up and say, oh, my phone's broken, oh, I couldn't get power on my phone, I have lost my headphones, someone's stolen my phone, oh, I exchanged my phone with someone else because of X reason. And so there's a precarity in there in terms of access to that device, but none of them were very long without it. The young people that had lost their headphones or broken their headphones, it was one of the top priorities of spending for the small amount of money that they had. As I mentioned, most young people streamed music by YouTube, but that was significantly affected by their access to 3G and Wi-Fi. And in the supported accommodation at the time, Wi-Fi was not a top priority in terms of what to provide, and 3G was expensive, so that was an issue. There was also some really, I was impressed actually with the level of consideration of why not to listen to music. And a number of young people were very particular about the music they listen to, what types they listen to, and when they listened to it, and they were very aware of the effect that it had on them emotionally. One particular young person didn't listen to a certain type of music because they knew how corrupting it was, in their words. Another young person, some music reminded him of his previous involvement in a gang, and so he avoided that music because it had a very visceral effect on his emotions and potentially on his actions, in his words. But for most people, the importance of music was really high. And some young people described music as being important in a way that it provided them with stability that humans hadn't, which in that sort of vulnerable, precarious sort of way that young people are when they're homeless, you can see why that might be. And so 83% rated music's importance as 4 or 5 out of 10. But there were some who didn't find music very important for them and had other things that they relied on, or other things that entertained them. The locations were many and varied, particularly when travelling, and regularity was pretty high. There were headphones everywhere. And sometimes in order to have a conversation with any young people, it involved getting past the headphones first. So a key theme that came out of it was the role that music has for young people in managing their mood. And it was very much a case of young people would listen to a specific piece of music to change their mood. So there are a number of quotes here on the screen, and some of them reflect the use of music to take them away from their particular situation, and to put them on a cloud, as one young person said. And then other ways that music was used was to change the mood, to put in a good mood when you're in a bad way, or to bring oneself down, to chill oneself out. And again, we've got a quote at the end there: music is the reason why I've continued where there's been times where I've wanted to stop everything, which when I heard was quite moving. But there's clearly a dependence on music listening there that I think we can sometimes overlook. Other emerging themes came through this. Some young people suggested that music was a particularly strong part of expressing their identity, with some identifying as a musician themselves. There was a distinct pattern with some young people. So the night stop environment and curating the day, some young people were using music to chunk up the day, to create points in the day, to get through what often was a very empty day. With night stop, young people would turn up at their accommodation, they'd spend the night, they'd have a meal and so on, and they'd leave in the morning, and then they wouldn't have anywhere to go until the next bit of accommodation. So music was had a role in chunking that day for some young people, and for others it was an opportunity. It was a thing that they did sort of almost ritualistically. They'd arrive, they'd have the tour of the house, they'd eat dinner with their host, then they'd go to their bedroom and listen to music. And I heard that from several young people that took part in this. And young people also suggested that the lyrics reflected their lives, particularly in their situation, and gave them strength in many ways to continue. And those lyrics had a particular impact on them. And some even suggested they relied on music more than for people in terms of consolation support, that, again, as I said, people had let them down, but music hadn't. So this is a fairly broad exploratory study at this stage, and I wanted to look at how this might have implications for service delivery. The context was within homeless services. Music has a role, I believe, in creating those environments, and they work under a principle of psychologically informed environments, but that literature doesn't, and that guidance doesn't have very much in there about music at all. It talks about aesthetics and it talks about noise, but it doesn't talk about music. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think there was an opportunity in terms of how staff members and Night Stop hosts engage with young people in delivering the service. I believe from this that that we should be, in delivering programs like this, we should be considering the role of music listening in the development of coping skills, resilience and emotion management. And particularly, I believe that musicians coming in to deliver music making sessions should consider participants' music listening practice in the way that they engage with young people, as it often has a significant role in that young person getting through the day, in their words. Currently, my PhD research is exploring this cohort in greater depth, exploring the role of music listening in daily life, and in particularly in managing their temporary accommodation research, in this research with homeless people, young people, and also in a comparative case study in the military, in temporary accommodation in the military. This is very much looking more in depth than the previous research that I'd done, and getting some more young people involved in it and having more in-depth conversations to make that those outcomes more rich. There's another little project that I did, which is just at the bottom here, My Music Matters, which is in a similar vein, which took young people's playlists of their lives and asked them why that music was really important to them. And that's another aspect of a way I've used to get under the skin of young people and their engagement in music. So that's it. That's a whistle-stop tour.
Yeah. Okay.
My references, so there you go.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for the presentation. So now we switch to John Sloboda. Professor John Sloboda is, I think, a well-known name in the field of music psychology, and at the moment he is active as a supervisor and a coordinator of research at the Guildhall School of Arts in London, where he is as well the principal investigator of an international research project focusing on social impact of making music. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm just starting my timer and getting my PowerPoints up. Oh, sorry. Oh. Can everybody see those? I'm just dwelling on the first slide for a moment so that you can see the logos of all the supporting institutions and organizations which have made this research possible. And although I take personal responsibility for everything I say, actually I'm standing on the work which has been done by a large 9-strong international team of colleagues, some of whom are in the room and can correct me if I make any mistakes. Just for the...
Sorry to interrupt, but we don't see the slides.
You don't see them?
No.
Oh, okay. That is a great fault of mine.
Yes, this is better.
Do you see them now?
Yes, if you...
Okay.
Okay, this is, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So as I was saying, I'm part of a 9-person strong international team, and everything that I say relies on my colleagues' work. But just for the interest of time, I won't read out all their names, but they are there in the slides, which I can certainly share later. The background of the study is it arose from interactions between researchers from different countries, all of whom actually met and increased their conversation through the SIMM platform itself. So this is very much a research project that was born of SIMM. And it was designed to fill a particular gap in research. And the gap is that most research which is presented at symposia like SIMM, and also very often in the research literature, is on individual projects with an interest particularly in the participants and how the activity benefits them. And Kate's previous presentation was exactly of that sort. This research project tries to look at many projects in the 4 countries we've chosen. And rather than the focus being on the participants, although of course the participants matter very much, the specific interest is on the musicians who work in these projects. And our 4 countries are Belgium, Colombia, Finland, and the UK. Why those 4 countries? Well, they are countries where there is relevant senior research capacity, closely connected to music higher education, either in the university sector or in the conservatoire sector. The countries represent different cultural contexts and stages of development of SIMM work. And there is, of course, opportunity for people in other countries to do similar comparative studies, and we have made a commitment to make our research protocols public so that other country-based groups are welcome to draw on them. And this could just be the start of something larger. So a whistle-stop tour through the progress to date. During the first year of the project, which has just finished, we constituted the research team, 4 postdocs, 1 in each country. And the first phase of the research was a scoping of the context and environment in each country and a compilation of known projects in each country. And this was primarily a documentary research phase, looking at relevant documents, websites, and also consulting experts in the field. And we have actually been able to publish that scoping project. And as of yesterday, it's no longer in press. It's actually on the Finnish Journal of Music Education website. Sorry that I wasn't able to update the slides in the time, but there is also a preprint version available on my website, and I can put that link in the chat a little bit later. From that phase A, we have used contacts to issue a wide call for participation in a preliminary practitioner survey. And that survey was launched in October 2020, and it ran for 3 months, and it actually was just closed last week. And in that time, we got 631 responses, of which 318 were complete. And we have just this very week begun the analysis of that data. Our future plans in the current year, we will move to the 3rd phase of the project, which will be in-depth interviews with at least 100 practitioners selected from those who, mainly from those who answered the survey and expressed a willingness to engage with the project more. And then in the final data gathering phase of the project, we will do at least 12 case studies, which will involve, hopefully, if the pandemic situation allows, site visits and dialogue with management, stakeholders, recipients, in addition to the musicians. And then in the 3rd and final year of the project, we'll move to dissemination and outcomes. There will be a country-based practitioner workshop in each of the 4 countries. There will be an international conference, and there will be a range of presentation and publications for the different constituencies of interest, practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and the general public. And also, we hope to have specific dialogue with pedagogical institutions who could be involved in the training of SIMM practitioners. So I want to just finish with some broad headline findings from phase A. And first of all, some similarities which arose across the countries as a result of our investigations. First, all of the countries have seen a growth in the size and the strategic importance of SIMM work, the number of projects and the number of musicians and indeed participants involved in those projects. That has usually been on the back of very high dependence on public funding from either the government and also some charities. And the consequence of that, or rather the reason for that, is that most of this activity is free or very low cost to the participants involved. There's a strong emphasis in all countries on children and young people, who are probably the majority of the participants in such projects. And there is widespread adherence to general principles of broad access to culture and social inclusion in cultural activity. And we also see that in all 4 countries, there's a very wide range of musical genres and forms being used. Classical music is certainly there, but it's by no means the dominant element in the work. There were also some differences between countries. In Europe, there is a greater focus on disability and also on work with older people. In Colombia, there is a specific focus for historical reasons on post-conflict reconciliation. And in terms of the discourse, in the UK, there's quite a strong discourse of specific deficits and needs, with projects actually having to show in a quite detailed way how they meet those specific deficits. And this contrasts with Belgian and Finnish discourses, which are more focused towards inclusivity and welcome to all, even though there may be some target groups, as it were, within that. And I was very interested that Philippe's presentation made exactly that point. In the UK, there is a considerable focus on measurable and specific social and personal outcomes, and very often that's linked to funding and funding renewal. Whereas in other countries, the focus seems to be more on general cultural enhancement. And finally, there are differences in the priority given to particular outcomes. In Belgium and UK, there's a high priority given to artistic excellence of the outcomes, but less so in Colombia, which prioritizes cultural affirmation and also post-conflict relief, and Finland, which emphasizes not so much the quality of the outcome, but the professional quality of the practice which goes into producing outcomes. So some of the questions that this preliminary phase leave hanging for future phases to answer and flesh out: is there an underlying commonality in the formation, beliefs and practices of SIMM practitioners which transcends cultural differences? Is there an emerging profession of SIMM practitioners which is globally recognizable? Or are there rather a set of country-specific practices with some overlaps? A second question is, how does the national context influence practitioners? Is the variation within a country as great as that between countries, or are there strong national characteristics? And how strong is the critical narrative? Does each country have a comparable mixture of what I call apostles, people who are fervent believers in the good that's done by this work, pragmatists who perhaps see both the advantages and the disadvantages, and skeptics who perhaps are doing the work but are questioning its value quite significantly? And the final question is, what can we learn which will help to better train and develop the practitioners of the future? Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Okay, thank you, John, for the presentation. I would like to invite now all the speakers for the panel discussion. Philip, you can switch on your screen. Okay. As we prepared the panel discussion, we don't know where we will end, but we know where we can start. So thank you for all these rich presentations. And I would like to ask some questions to all of you. maybe it's from your specific research, it won't be able to answer a question, but from your experience, certainly, I think you can contribute. So first, I would like to go back to the first topic of this session, actually, which was motivation of musicians. So my first question would be, what do we know actually about the motivation of musicians to start and to keep on working in these socially engaged music projects? And I would like to start with John. Maybe John, can you already tell something about the aspect of motivation from the international research, or is it too early to say something about this?
Unfortunately, it's a bit too early because the issue of motivation doesn't really emerge very strongly in the publicly available documents that projects will put online. But it is absolutely a concern of the next phase of the research, and already the questionnaire, which we're beginning to analysis, begins to probe into that in terms of how important socially engaged practice is for a particular musician in comparison to the other kinds of work that they could be doing. It's certainly the case from my general experience that in recent times, many musicians have to do SIMM work as part of their general work pattern because there simply isn't enough work on the concert platform to sustain viable careers. So musicians are having to do teaching and various other kinds of things. And for example, in some major symphony orchestras in my country, and I think it's the same in others, if you're a member of that symphony orchestra, you are expected to do a proportion of your time in social projects, whether you like it or not. And one of the interesting things that this project, I hope, will uncover is how many of the musicians who get involved in this work are real enthusiasts or become real enthusiasts and then begin to see this work as their major work because it meets perhaps ethical priorities that they have which the concert platform cannot fulfill for them. Maybe that's enough for me from me for now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. And Kate and Philip, I think your research doesn't really focus on this aspect of motivation, but at least maybe you can say something about it. Philip, I think you were very close to motivation at a certain point because you talk about, for example, what it brings to the coaches as well to do this kind of work. So maybe you can add something from your experience doing the research with this TOZO group.
Well, the motivation of the musicians changed with their beliefs. I think by doing this, getting involved in this kind of project, they changed really. They said it very strongly, and this change was, of course, based on their perceived benefits for the participants, like empowerment, social dynamics, learning opportunities for them. The interesting thing was we did also research of the participants in another study that it was not shared completely. The research on the practitioners showed a more nuanced image. They were very positive and they were about especially about the social environment they were in and the social context they developed, but also there was some negative effect. If they were like outside the project, they reported sometimes negative feelings towards others and towards the group. So this was a very interesting finding, that it was not all positive for the participants, but it was like nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I intervene and just follow up on that, Philip, and ask whether in the particular case of this orchestra, it was the same three coaches throughout the life of the project. In other words, had they been staying with the project for quite some number of years? Yes,
in the beginning there were some others, and one came by, but mainly I think for more than 3 years, they were the same coaches. So they had also their own development, their own change during the project. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kate, can you contribute something about motivation, or is it not? Did you not touch that area?
I think within my research, I didn't touch it in great depth. However, as someone working with arts organisations, I've got just a couple of comments. One is just how there's been a great change over the last few years, I believe, in how organisations have looked at participatory work. It has, in the past, it's been, we do our artistic, we put on our concerts, we do our dance performances, festivals, etc., and then we do some participation work. And over the years, I think the understanding of what those are and how they fit together has come closer and closer. So it's now much more about engaging different audiences that are of equal worth, and it's not just we do concerts and then we do our participatory work. And I think that's really important in terms of the motivations of the musicians taking part. I think there's been a real journey over the last few years, and I certainly see that in the organisations I'm working with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And then I would like to elaborate a little bit on, of course, the motivation of musicians to invest in making music with these groups. It probably interacts as well, I don't know, with the benefits of these practices or the perceived benefits for the participants they work with. So I would like to talk a little bit about the question, do you think the musicians and participants, they share the same ideas about social relevance of these projects? Or from your experience, do you think there is maybe a difference? Philip, you answered these questions already a little bit, but I don't know whether you want to add something.
Maybe a small thing. Many research on this kind of programs, they mostly report a very positive outcome for the participants. Of course, I strongly believe that. I saw it in my project, but I think it's also good to see that there can be a more nuance, that it's not always a very positive or a super positive story, but it doesn't have to be. If we can deliver some aspects that are really important for them, even if they're like balanced with negative feelings, it can be also a great path, let's say, to a flourishing life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I could add something there. I can remember conversations with SIMM practitioners, particularly maybe founders of new projects, directors of projects who started something, who would say what was really important in the early stages of the project was simply to build trust and acceptance. So we'd go maybe to a community hall in a particular neighborhood, and we'd open our doors and we'd sit there. And as Philip said, it's very important. You usually have to offer your participants something to eat and drink and chat to whoever shows up. And over time, people say, these people are genuine. It's not that they're here one day and they're gone the next. We can rely on them being there every Thursday. And the simple fact of being able to go somewhere every Thursday at 4 o'clock or whatever it is, and know that those people will be there and they'll be offering something for you, it can be as basic as that that is the beginning of the shared understanding of the value of whatever is then offered, even before the music starts, that there is some kind of personal trust and relationship and a point of, I can go there and meet this person and be safe there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think, Philip, as far as I know, Tozo, this is as well shared by the teachers or the coaches.
Oh yes, very much. This idea of trust is maybe the most important thing. We really felt like they cannot fake it. If you fake it, if you try to be somebody else, if you try to be like a social worker or something, it doesn't work. Especially, I think, with such a group who has who has had a rather heavy life, you can say, and it's a kind. I see it as a kind of self-protection from the participants. If you're not really. They see it directly. So this basic idea of trust, like John said, who is in the small things, that are probably the most important issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kate?
I would echo that. When I was in a previous organisation I've worked with, we used to talk about the journey from the person's house to the front door of the project being at least 50% of the hard work. We imagine that the project starts when they walk in through the door and take part in the particular program, but actually that part of getting them to turn up relies on those relationships to be built, relies on trust, relies on that integrity, and that has been true for all the subsequent things I've been involved in. So absolutely, I'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we're on the same level here, yes. And then maybe related to this question, in which way do you think musicians active in this project work with these social aims or this understanding in a conscious manner, maybe in their artistic or pedagogical strategies? Is this reflected? Do they work with this idea of trust consciously when they develop strategies for musical work? Philip, maybe you can start. This question is close to your focus on pedagogical strategies.
Well, one of the, I think, one of the interesting things is that they didn't develop these strategies in advance. I talked to them and they all said they had like a different idea from the start. They would bring sheet music, they had ideas of structures, songs even, and they started the orchestra and it didn't work. So they developed it really from bottom up and out of the collaboration and get really a connection with the world of the participants, and that is very I think it's the same with Kate, a very important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, I have absolutely heard that from practitioners. They had a plan and then they've turned up and it's all gone out of the window. And I think that, yeah, one of the things I'd like to bring across from my research is that taking that time to listen to the participants and understand what they bring to the door is really important in how you then design it. How you do that, whether that's within the context of the programme or pre-staged in the planning, is another matter. But I think it's incredibly important to understand that, particularly with my group, I like to see them as musicians. They may not have had the opportunity to have formal lessons or to own an instrument or to do all those things that our elitist society when it comes to music requires, but they are musicians. They've had musical expressiveness in the ways that they could do, in the things that they could access, and to reflect that, to understand that, to inquire about that is really important in the way to design programs to get the maximum impact out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We do have good examples of reflective organizations and reflective practitioner groups who are constantly reviewing their activity and asking, are we doing what actually the participants need and want? And in fact, last week, Jeff Baker's keynote presentation described a project in Colombia where there has been an intense amount of self-evaluation and a quite dramatic change in the focus of the pedagogy as a result. And I think we could expect that in many of the projects that we will be examining in our international research, but we haven't actually started doing those in-depth interviews yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Philip, I would like to switch to the lesson you take from the pedagogical strategies for formal music education. So maybe it's interesting, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, because yeah, why do you think this way of improvising could be enriching for formal education, music education, and is this a realistic intention, maybe for the context of Belgium?
Yes, well, for me, it's the most important thing. For my focus is on that. I come myself from a jazz background. Of course, in jazz music, there's a lot of improvisation, but it's not only in jazz music. Improvisation is getting more and more into the curricula of the formal music education worldwide, of course. And the last 10 years, I think, or maybe some more, there has been a great critique against the codification of music education, depending on dominant idiomatic styles. There has been a lot of research about it. And so I was thinking, what can we learn from these community music projects? Because they show a lot of motivation, flow, eagerness, risk-taking, just playing without knowing what you play, just going for it. And I think it would be really great if we could balance the two, let's say, the structured improvisation, learning a musical instrument, technical, and so on. But from the start, mixing it with this eagerness, this self-expression, even if you cannot play that good. And I strongly believe that the answer of motivating musicians in formal music education to engage lifelong in improvisation is in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a good link, I think, you make. Maybe John or Kate, do you want to contribute something to that, or did you think about this relation to formal music education?
I wanted to ask a related but somewhat different question to Kate, which is that your presentation seemed to hint at the end that you were saying to musicians and music practitioners who might want to work with groups such as homeless young people, that they should pay very close attention to what the young people are already doing in music, and that somehow what is offered in terms of active music making may be less important to these constituencies than the music that they listen to and carry around every day on their devices. I just wonder whether you had a view, you wanted to expand that a bit more.
Yeah, one interpretation of what I found in terms of, I mean, many of the young people I talk to listen to grime music, for instance. And if you said to most music making practitioners, music participation do a session based on grime, you're going to have some issues, because a heck of a lot come from a classical background, and whilst they might listen to a wide range of genres, there's a disjoint there. And I think there are many ways around that. One is to recruit people that are embedded in those particular music genres to deliver their programs. But I think the other comes back to a reflection on the personal interaction that we all have with music. Going back to the question about motivation of musicians, a lot of the time when I've talked to musicians about why they do the participatory work, it's because of the impact it has had on them. And that impact is common, even if the genre isn't common. So I think both classical musicians or jazz musicians or whatever genre musicians can connect with participants on a totally different genre based on the impact it has. But also I think both sides can introduce music from a different genre to each other in a way that can still have benefits. So I think it's about conversation and that integrity and being honest about where you're coming from and not trying to be something else, as well as what you bring to the table. I think you need to bring both the music and a different genre and your motivations for that as well. Both things are really important to be straight about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, one thing I hear in as well, Kate, as Philip's presentation and as well the discussion is that you both implicitly think about social impact of these projects in a not in a one-way direction. It's not only an impact on the participant, but as well the impact is on the side of the musician. Yeah. So maybe you can. This is really important, I think, because most of the research it focuses on the social impact on the side of the participant. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can say a little bit more about this, Philip or Kate.
Well, the thing that these musicians these three coaches who were experienced in community music, even then they said it changed them, their vision also not on music, but also on society, and certainly, and I asked them, on their vision of how they teach informal music education. It changed their way. So that was a great, I mean, that was like a great outcome for me. I don't know if you have to be involved in community music to learn that, but it's I think it's a good way. I mean, it's a very good way. So it's like my conviction that everybody who wants to be a music teacher should have the experience, should have such an experience, I think.
Mm-hmm. Kate, do you like to contribute something?
Only to say that I think just reflecting back on the previous part of the conversation about how we train musicians. Mm-hmm. Previously, it was very much on the art, performance, teaching, that sort of thing. And now increasingly musicians are engaging in training to prepare themselves for this sort of work, and to kind of understand some of the skills and techniques that might be involved. But it is interesting that many musicians have gone from, oh, I'm going to be a performer, to actually the majority of what I do is this sort of work, working with people. And I would argue that actually this is where it should all, like 90% of musicians' work should be in this area and 10% is on the stage, because our society is so separate in terms of musicians and non-musicians. By putting all the effort into here, we would provide more audiences to get to experience what's on stage, and we would have a more natural interaction with art as humans. And so I think there's a journey for us to go on in terms of how we train students coming through to prepare for that work, and put it on a higher pedestal and reflect the fact that people love working in this area, that it's very rewarding, and it's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Then maybe just one small topic we didn't touch, but which is in the title, I think, of the session. So maybe if you take a step behind, could we say something about the main tendencies we see in experiences of musicians, and maybe as well, and more specific, the needs of musicians in this SIMM project? So what are their needs in order to make their work or keep their work qualitative and fulfilling? Can you say something about this from the research? Maybe John, have you already a little thing to contribute about this, or maybe not yet?
Not yet, but I think that certainly there is a sense in the profession at large, or the part of the profession I see, which is the conservatoire world and world of conservatoire training, that musicians should need to have at least a basic toolkit in this area before they graduate. So in other words, SIMM training shouldn't be a specialist elective training, but there should be some element of SIMM training in the basic conservatoire training of all musicians. So in a sense, that's a projected need. People who are, as it were, leading the profession are saying, musicians, you're going to need this. So we really ought to be making sure you all get a basic toolkit at least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Philip?
Yes, of course, I agree, and you put it very beautiful, John. It should be there in education for everybody. And it still is not, from my experience, I think, or not as much as we would want it, even though, especially for improvisation, I can say, of course, we all know the work of Lucy Green about informal learning. So there has been some input, of course, but regarding improvisation, I don't see it that much. And a second thing is the importance of the structural organization to do such projects. That's also a need for musicians active in these projects. They have to be surrounded by a really good structural organization. Otherwise, it's practically important. So these two things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Kate, something to contribute there for the needs of musicians? Or
I think from my research, I think a large part of interacting with the young people is the social skills rather than the sort of musical skills. The musical skills are really important, but I think there could be a training need in there to really invest in the social skills of things like coaching techniques, things like listening skills, skills that help the musician to build those relationships with individuals, to build trust. Mm-hmm. And building that into any training, I think, is really important, rather than necessarily just relying on musicians' personal, natural skills and qualities, which are often there as good basis. But there are lots of techniques that could be built into that participation training as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether one of you has a question for someone else. If not, I think we can conclude the panel discussion, and I give the word to Lucas for the Q&A part.
Yes. So we have a whole series of questions. And I have picked out some because we will not be able to introduce all the questions of the attendees. But maybe to start with, Mary Cohen, she prefers to talk about unhoused people instead of homeless people. But Mary, she's asking the question how to engage with unhoused or formerly unhoused people in figuring out the research questions. And connected to this question of Mary is Luc Nijs' question, more about methodology. Luc is wondering whether we don't need alternative methods other than surveys and interviews to collect information and to do our research with particular groups of participants. So he's also asking ideas of the panel on the methodological question. Voilà.
Shall I go for it? Yes, absolutely. I think the interview survey approach was fine to start off with, but has lots of limitations. In my current research, there's a large part of what I've called observation, but is in effect hanging around in the supported accommodation and spending time with young people to build up a more in-depth relationship with more trust there, so they're more likely to share things with me that they might not do in an interview with some random person they've just walked into a room with. And also to just understand some of the rhythm of life in those contexts, which then gives colour to what they then say to me in the interview. So that's really, really important, and there are definite limitations in what I presented in terms of methodology. The other thing is this methodology I mentioned very briefly at the end about playlists. That was a project I did subsequently where I asked young people to write a playlist of the music that they that reflected their time when they were homeless or unhoused, and and then I asked them to talk about that, and that elicited a lot more information than I would have got from some direct questions about their life when they were unhoused, because they were talking about the music that they engaged with at that time. So I got a different set of information, and I think that is a different approach that can bring about a deeper insight as well. Philip?
Yes, well, yeah, I would like to add, and Luc Nijs knows, of course, when you research the participants, if you do it with the coaches, it can be, you can use interviews and all these things we know, but for the participants, it could be very interesting to, well, let's say, let them make their own videos with the smartphone during the rehearsals, using these spontaneous recordings, and then provide a first-person perspective, trying to grasp this embodied knowledge they have, so that avoid the feeling with them that they are being researched. And I think we really should go on the path of looking for spontaneous things, hanging out, like you said. I did the interviews with some of the TOZO members also like that, just talking to them before a gig, after rehearsals, when we drank coffee, something, talking, and seeing the importance of this kind of research method also as valuable. I think it's a
I have another question from Jane Bryant. Jane has a question for Philip. Philip, you talked about the need for authenticity in the work of TOZO with the participants, and Jane is wondering, what would music making be that was not authentic, have an authentic look or feel like from the participants' perspectives?
I think if not authentic could mean that you're before an orchestra and you say, I'm the conductor, I'm the experienced musician, I know how it has to sound, and now I'll conduct you. That they will simply walk away. They say, no, we don't do that. And sometimes there's this tensions, because there are of course many projects, very nice projects with a conductor, a community music project. But I think it's still a very hard tension that you have to be also this authenticity. It means that you're really well, not only yourself, but that you put yourself at the same level as the participants. That you, for instance, playing with them also is very important. I think not just saying what they have to play, but playing with them. But how would it look without authenticity? I really don't know. I think it wouldn't be good, I think.
Oh, one more question from Abel Kenny. I don't know whether I pronounce your name well, but she's asking the question about. She wants to be hearing from the panel more about the influence of the beliefs that practitioners and facilitators have in this kind of programs, and whether you think that their beliefs may differ according to the type of training that they have behind them, and the identity building that then goes with that. Who would like to respond to this?
Well, I could certainly say that the beliefs of musicians in the projects that we are hoping to investigate is one of the fundamental areas in which we want to probe. The interviews that we're planning will be looking at the specific practices of musicians in the projects that we look at. Where did those practices come from? And that's in terms of perhaps training and development, but also what beliefs, philosophies, ideologies underpin those practices. So this is absolutely at the center of our project. But for an answer, you're going to have to wait at least another year.
There's a question of Griet Verschelde, which is the following. In most of these projects, artistic work is very closely connected with social support, social work and community building. And she would like you to, based on your experiences, your research, tell us more about the distinguished roles of musicians and social professionals in these projects. Or are these roles more blurring and interconnected? In other words, do you see a specific mastery of experience for musicians on the one hand and for social professionals on the other hand?
Well, I can talk about in the TOZO project that was really intertwined. The people working for TOZO, and I think one of them is even, Dieter is even attending this. It really intertwined, like I said, and that was very important. Musicians alone is not enough. Also the surrounding, the structural organization, the one who provides the coffee, who talks also to the participants, who opens the doors, and so on. I think that was a great strongness of this project. That it was really, there was like no distinction, really no distinction. Also, some of the, let's say, social workers, I don't know how you should call them really, but they joined also the orchestra. They were all playing with the orchestra during rehearsals also, so there was no differentiating in roles. And I always thought that this was a strong issue in the project.
Ole Christian Einersen asks the following question: what do you think of the musical outcome on, or the musical production? Is it important, or is the participation of the members, musicians, participants more important, most important? Said otherwise, what's in fact the role of the musical product? Is it important that it's good?
From my perspective, I think that comes back to that quote at the end, I think, was it of Philippe's presentation about striving for it to be as best as it possibly can be. In my experience, for instance, with the National Orchestra for All, the young people were not necessarily in a as progressed as they might be due to the opportunities they previously had. But with the resources that they had, with the time that they had, the striving for something that was as high quality as possible was really important, as was the point of presenting it to an audience and getting their reaction. The way I've always talked about it is that you can do all that participatory work, you can do that project, you can create something, you can play, you can perform, make something together, but the moment you put it on a stage in front of an audience and you get their feedback and they clap, that's like a catalyst that then secures it going forwards. So this is not based in research, it's based in experience, but it's held true that that striving for something that then is put in front of an audience and had a response to something that's enjoyed is really important. Just doing something for fun is great, but I would argue that it's not as fulfilling and will not have such long-lasting effects.
If I may, Lucas, or maybe we don't have time, a small, I would add, because I don't completely, I have a slightly different opinion than Kate, for the sake of the argument. In the TOZA project, the outcome was in fact not important. It was the process who was the most important thing and the social aspects of it. But we did a lot of concerts, and it gave the people a great sense of empowerment, because they were there in the big venue, you know, they were like the masters once they were on stage. So that was important of the outcome. But it was not like looking for or rehearsing for a project. Yeah? So, well.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I think there's a rich area for further discussion we probably don't have time for, but yeah, really interesting.
We have a question of Yanis Miralis to Philip. He would like you, Philip, to describe a bit more how improvisation was taught, shared with the participants in the project that you studied. How they were invited to participate in improvisation, and also, did participants already knew how to play a musical instrument beforehand? You said already something about this in your presentation, but yeah, more specific, was it free improvisation or guided improvisation?
Yeah, I didn't talk too much about that, but in fact it was, well, let's say free improvisation, but not like the idiomatic style of free improvisation. It was really open, sometimes very chaotic and unstructured music. Most of the participants didn't have former schooling, but also there were some even professional musicians with a master degree and so on. They were also participating. So this was a very nice mix of using sounds and grooves and small riffs, even with a few notes sometimes, and elaborating on that. And we saw always in the rehearsal, it was like a train that was going on for 2-3 hours non-stop. And I really saw and felt sometimes the entrainment even in my body, you know, it went on. And so that's also a way of improvising. Improvisation doesn't always have to be, of course, structured improvisation, but you could say it was a rather free kind of a free collective improvisation. Yeah.
Well, we have time for a last question. I proposed the question of Graça Mota to John Svoboda. John, she would like you to share some of the key issues that will be asked in the in-depth interviews with the practitioners.
Thanks very much, Lucas. Graça. Yes, we know very well what the areas are that we want to investigate. What we're doing at the moment is deciding how to turn those areas of interest into specific questions that will elicit rich material. But the areas are, first of all, the training and artistic history, That's to say what sort of training the practitioner received, how they got into SIM artistic work, and how being involved in such work has changed their practice and their professional values and views. A second area is motivation, to say why the practitioner undertakes this kind of work. The third area, as we mentioned before, is beliefs, what the practitioner believes about the way in which music activity achieves social impact. Then there's the whole area of content and process, the repertoire they use, the kinds of practice and methods of engagement, and what types of recipients to achieve what kinds of musical and social ends. And then there is the monitoring and evaluation. That is to say, how does the practitioner assess the social impact of their work? And I'm not here talking about formal external assessments and questionnaires and surveys or whatever, but how the musician, as it were, feels and intuits in the room that their practice is going in the right direction in a particular session. And finally, of course, because we are now in a very different time, something about how COVID and the pandemic has or might affect their work in the future. So those are the main areas that we'll hope to cover.
Very well. Thank you, Anne de Bisschop, Philippe Verneert, Kate Wareham, and John Sloboda for your precious contributions today. I'm sure you have interested people who attended this session to join again for other upcoming symposium sessions of the coming Tuesdays. In fact, there will be a second session on today's subject, what motivates musicians to engage themselves in social music projects, on the 23rd of February. It will then be Graça Motta who will chair the session, presenting research from Germany, Japan, Italy, and France. But the 2 coming weeks, we will first welcome sessions presenting research of music programs in detention. Next week, Tuesday, the 22nd of January, John Speyer will chair a session with research on music in detention in Belgium, Ireland, and the UK. And the following week, on Tuesday, the 2nd of February, Mary Cohen will chair a session presenting research in this field from the US, Germany, Belgium, Brazil, Scotland, and England. You can find all the details on next week's and all other sessions on the websites of SIMM and of BOZAR. But you can, in advance of the upcoming program, also listen to our SIMM podcast with interviews with those sharing the panel discussions. The podcasts can easily be found online because many different directories propose it now. The sessions will be similar to today's session. They will last for about 1.5 hours. They will start with presentations of research, followed by a panel discussion with those who just presented their research, and then there will be time for a Q&A allowing you to be active as well. We hope to be able to also propose at the end of each session some music performed by participants in Belgium's social and community music projects. The pandemic is not making it easy, though, to guarantee this for each and every session. Today, we fortunately do have such a musical closure to propose to you. We can now listen and see the youngest members of the Ladybirds, Ghent, Belgium, a few minutes at work on a composition by Peter Vermeers. Voilà. So I imagine an applause, or is it just in my imagination? So, bravo, the Ladybirds. I hope we will later in this symposium also be able to see and hear more music from Belgian projects such as the Ladybirds and a series of others. I look forward to see or hear or read you these coming weeks. Bye.